Hi everyone. I'm reading part 2, like I promised, to the Night Trilogy, Night, Dawn, and Day by Eli Wiesel. Let's see, forward by there's another forward by Francois Maroc. Foreign journalists frequently came to see me. I am wary of them, torn as I am between my desire to speak to them freely and the fear of putting weapons into the hands of interviewers whose attitudes towards France I do not know. During these encounters, I tend to be on my guard. During that particular morning, the young Jew who came to interview me on behalf of the Tel Aviv Daily won me over from the first moment. Our conversation very quickly became more personal. Soon I was sharing with them memories from the time of the occupation. It is not always the events that have touched us personally that affect us the most. I confided to my young visitor that nothing I had witnessed during that dark period had marked me as deeply as the image of cattle cars filled with Jewish children at the Auschwitz train station. ... Yet I did not even see them with my own eyes. It was my wife who described them to me, still under the shock of the horror she had left. At the time, we knew nothing about the Nazis' extermination methods, and who would have imagined such things? But these lambs, torn from their mothers, that was an outrage far beyond anything we could have thought possible. I believe that on that day, I first became aware of the mystery of the iniquity whose explosion marked the end of an era and the beginning of another. The dream conceived by Western man in the 18th century, whose dawn he thought he had glimpsed in 1789, which until August 2nd, 1914, had become stronger with the advent of the Enlightenment and scientific discoveries. That dream finally vanished for me before those trainloads of small children, and yet I was still thousands of miles away from imagining that those children were destined to feed the gas chambers and crematoria. This then was what I probably told this journalist, and when I said with a sigh, I have thought of these children so many times, he told me I was one of them. Was one of them. He had seen his mother, a beloved little sister, most of his family, except his father and two other sisters, disappear in a furnace, fueled by screaming creatures. As for this father, the boy had to witness his martyrdom day. Martyrdom day. Blech. After day, and finally his agony and death. And what a death. The circumstances of it were narrated in this book, and I shall allow readers who would be as numerous as those reading the diary of Anne Frank to discover them for themselves, as well as by what miracle the child himself escaped. I maintain, therefore, that the personal record coming as it does after so many others, and describing the abomination such as we might have thought no longer had any secrets for us, indifferent and distinct and unique neither less. The fact of the Jews of the small town of Transylvania, called Signet, their blindness as they confronted a destiny from which they would still have had time to flee. The inconceivable passivity with which they surrendered to it, deaf to the warnings, and pleaded of a witness who, having escaped the massacre, relates to them what he has seen with his own eyes, but they refuse to believe him and call him a madman. This set of circumstances would surely have suffocated, I can't read, oh my god, to inspire a book to which I believe no matter can be compared. It is, however, another aspect of the extraordinary book that was held my attention. The child who tells us his story here was one of God's chosen. From the time he began to think, he lived only for God, setting the Talmud, eager to be initiated into the Kabbalah, wholly dedicated to the Almighty. Have we ever considered the consequence of a less visible, less striking abomination, yet the worst of all for those of us who have faith, the death of God in the soul of a child who soon faces absolute evil? Let us try to imagine what goes on in his mind, as his eyes watch rings of black smoke unfurl in the sky, smoke that emanates from the furnace into which his little sister and his mother have been thrown after thousands of other victims. Shall I never forget that night, the first night in camp? They turned my life into one long night, 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget the snake. Never shall I forget the small faces of the children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence that deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those memories that murdered my God, my soul, and turned my dreams to ashes. Never shall I forget those things, even where I condemned to live as long as God himself. Never. It was then I understood what had first appealed me to about this young Jew. The gaze of a Lazarus risen from the dead, yet still held captive in the somber regions into which he had strayed, stumbling over desecrated corpses. For him, Netzizitz, I have no idea how to pronounce that one, cry articulated an almost physical reality. God is dead, the God of love, gentleness, and consideration, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, had, under the watchful gaze of this child, vanished forever into the smoke of the human holocaust, demanding by the race the most precocious of all idols. Now many devout Jews endured such a death. How many devout Jews endured such a death? On that most horrible day, even among all those other bad days when the child witnessed the hanging, yes, of another child who he tells us, had the face of a sad angel. He heard someone behind him groan, "For God's sake, where is God?" And from within me I heard a voice answer, "Where is he?" Where is he? Hanging here from this gallows? On the last day of the Jewish year, the child is present at the solemn ceremony of Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah. He hears thousands of slaves cry out in unison, "Blessed be the Almighty." Not so long ago, he too would have knelt down with such worship, such awe, such love. But this day, he does not kneel, he stands. The human creature, humiliated, offended in ways that were inconceivable to the mind or the heart, defies the blind and deaf divinity. For I longer pleaded for anything. I was no longer able to limit. On the contrary, I felt very strong. I was the accuser, God the accused. My eyes had opened and I was alone. Terribly alone in a world without God, without man, without love or mercy. I was nothing but ashes now, but I felt myself to be stronger than this Almighty to whom my life had been bound for so long. In the midst of these men assembled for prayer, I felt like an observer, a stranger. And I, who believed that God is love, what answer was there to give my young interlocutor, whose dark eyes still held the reflections of the angelic sadness that had appeared one day on the face of a hanged child? What did I say to him? Did I speak to him of the other Jew, that sacrificed brother who perhaps resembled him and whose cross conquered the world? Did I explain to him that what had been a stumbling block for his faith had become a cornerstone for mine? And that the connection between the cross and human suffering remains, in my view, the key to the infallible mystery in which the faith of his childhood was lost. And yet Zion has risen up again out of the crematoria and the slaughterhouses. The Jewish nation had been resurrected from among its thousands of dead. It is they who have given in new life. We do not know the worth of one single drop of blood, one single tear. All is grace. If the Almighty is the Almighty, the last word for each of us belonging to Him. That is what I should have said to the Jewish child, but all I could do was embrace him and damn, damn. They first, the last chapter was the last one. The first one was about seeing kids being burned. Now it's going on to seeing kids being one kid hanging another or being forced. What an image! What an image! I mean, come on. Can you imagine seeing your brother hanging your sister or your cousin, little cousin hanging another cousin or whatnot? I mean, come on. This was evil. This was so evil.